Hey friend, welcome to Authentic Performance, the podcast. My name is Nat and I'm your host. At Authentic Performance, our mission is to provide education and advocacy for all athletes, developing awareness surrounding identity, purpose, and health, so athletes can live well beyond their sport. This week, we have two very special guests. First up, we have my younger brother, Ryan Osborne, who currently attends Harvard University, where he plays on the football team and is studying biology with an emphasis in pre-medicine. Next, we have his girlfriend and a sweet friend of mine, Talysha Wilkerson, who is studying business management economics at UC Santa Cruz, where she plays basketball. Ryan and Talysha aren't just family to me, they're also two of my very best friends and encouragers in my walk with the Lord. So I'm so excited to get to share their wisdom with you. On this episode, they give insight into what it's like to maintain a long-distance, Christ-centered relationship in the busiest season of their lives. They also talk about their experiences as first-year student athletes and some of the lessons they've learned along the way. I can't wait for you to get to learn from them. This is such a sweet conversation. All right, I'm super excited to have a couple special guests here today. I have my brother Ryan and his girlfriend Talysha, who I also happen to be really close friends with. So I'm super excited to have you guys on the podcast this morning. I want to start by just giving you a chance to tell us a little bit about yourself. Ryan, you can start, and then we'll hear from Talysha.
Yeah, so it's thanks for having us, Nat. I'm Ryan Osborne, Natalie's younger brother. Grew up in the same place as she did, Fall River, California, small town. In high school, kind of got involved in everything. Played football, basketball, baseball, and track. Was involved in FFA, student council. Kind of just tried to do as much as I could. A lot, just like Natalie. Also, just kind of super involved. Now I'm attending Harvard University, playing football there, and I'm studying biology with a pre-medicine focus, and the kind of plans to go to medical school and eventually become a doctor. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to in the future. So if you want to go to.
Yeah, so my name is Talysha Wilkerson. I was born in Chico, California, and I wasn't super involved in a lot of things in high school and stuff, but one thing I was involved in was basketball. I started playing basketball from a young age because of my dad, who was my coach. And then, so I play basketball at UC Santa Cruz now, and I'm studying business, and I hope to go into real estate later on.
Very cool. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting switch here for me on this side, getting to talk to you guys because I know so much about you. So I'm excited to kind of dive in. T mentioned her dad was her basketball coach. Her dad was also my basketball coach. We played together, so that's how we met. But I want you guys to tell us your story of how you guys met and started dating.
Oh, we're getting juicy right away. We actually were teammates, believe it or not.
But we met before that.
Oh yeah, we
kind of.
We
knew each other because Natalie played with me, so I knew who Ryan was.
Yeah, she knew who I was. I wasn't quite sure who she was yet, No, I'm just kidding. And so over COVID-19, though, when that happened, there wasn't a lot going on, and so I was training with basketball with Talysha's dad, and then we had started kind of like a guys' high school team, a travel team to go play down in Yuba City, because that was kind of the only place that was allowing any kind of sports activity, like the fall after the COVID first happened. And then my dad actually convinced Talysha to come play with us. But she wanted to eventually. Like you had a good time, and you met me, Yeah. And so then we became teammates, and so played like 6 months together every weekend. We're playing basketball together, long car rides down to Yuba City, and then spent a lot of time at Angini's. That was also a good little hangout spot. But that's how we met, and then proceeded to do 2.5 years in running of long distance. So yeah. it's been fun.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. Kind of how that has played out for you, but um, you guys have both mentioned your involvement in college sports, and you both just finished your first year of college athletics. So we'd love to hear a little bit about what your first year was like of playing a college sport, being a student, getting involved in different things. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, it was it's definitely a big for me, it was definitely a big change. Like as busy as it was in high school, college athletics is just different. It's basically a full-time job while going to school, while trying to kind of have your social scene figured out too in your first year of college. And so that was kind of a big change. For me, it was interesting too because I came onto the football team as a walk-on, and so the first couple weeks when I was just kind of figuring out how I was going to kind of fit into the team and join kind of a different way than most was a little bit stressful, kind of a lot going on there. But it ended up being a really good year for me. I didn't play at all, like very few freshmen did with our program. But I really enjoyed it. Kind of found my footing, and started to really enjoy practice and our workouts and just kind of progressing as the season went on. We started like fall sport. Sorry, football is a fall sport, and so we kind of jumped right into season right into school. But then once the season's over, then we have like a full spring term of basically just training and preparing for the next year. And so that was kind of when I really kind of was able to gain traction, kind of figure out who I could be on the football team and kind of start really having a goal for myself moving forward rather than just kind of, swimming and then trying to just fit in any way I could into the program.
Yeah, for me, I was super excited to go to college and kind of do something new and just kind of get away. And so, yeah, I was looking forward to it. And then I was excited to know that when I got there, I'd have people that I already kind of could hang out with, like with my teammates and stuff. Um, and then, yeah, meeting with lots of different kinds of people is cool too. But I'd say I really started to have the most fun during my spring quarter. I mean, I had basketball and stuff, which was a lot. Basketball in school is a lot together, and I had to learn how to manage my time a lot better. Which now going to the next year, I'll definitely know how to do that better. But anyways, I'd say my spring quarter I had the most fun and just found some groups that I was able to be with and really just get to experience college the way that I didn't really before, like in the first two quarters.
Yeah, so with that being said, I mean, obviously you both have had a pretty positive experience so far, but what are some of the challenges that you've had as a student athlete, having both academics and athletics, trying to balance those two together? What are some of the hard parts of that?
That was a good transition. I'll give you that. That was a good segue. Yeah. So for challenge, like there's always a lot of challenges. I think the biggest one for me is just time, and just kind of wear and tear on like mentally, physically. It's like being just I don't want to say just a student, right? Because like students are involved in all sorts of different things. But I think kind of being a college athlete has a special kind of just drain on your body and your mind that you constantly have to be like mentally, emotionally, and physically ready to go for your sport. And so when you also combine that with going to class, having labs, doing homework for like 15 to 20 hours a week, and then kind of trying to have some time for yourself and trying to stay healthy, have a good balance with your mental health, your physical health, enjoyment, and then also just kind of staying up on your grades and on your sport. It just becomes a lot to manage. So I think that was definitely the biggest challenge. And then also just with both internal and external pressure. For me, I know it's like I kind of tend to be pretty hard on myself, and I'm wanting to be the best athlete and best person that I can. And so for me, I would find a lot of stress just from putting a lot of pressure to perform at practice, to perform at workouts, and trying to kind of rise up the ladder of a roster. Football, you have upwards of 100 guys on the team, and so it's like you always have, even if you're a starter, you have guys behind you hunting for the spot, and if you're not, you're always hunting for that starting spot. And so that's kind of just an internal type of pressure. And then as far as like external too, you're expected to do well in your grades, keep up with those things, and sometimes not with a lot of just natural support, right? Like you might have a good support system back home, but going off to college, you no longer have that right at your disposal, and so you kind of have to handle all those kind of like juggling pieces on your own for the most part. Or like I can kind of talk about later, with my experience in my first year, like you really have to find out how to ask for help and how to get help in the right ways. But it's not laid out for you in college, right? Like you have to know what you need and how to get those resources in order to help you in the best way.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I went through too. Just um, definitely time was the huge challenge for me because I didn't make most of my time with school and stuff, and I didn't really go and seek out the resources either. And so like, there's a lot of times where I could have volunteers and stuff like that, but I didn't really do that, and so I kind of create like stress for myself, and then have that all with basketball, with pressures too of basketball, and just trying to do the best that I can. But yeah,
Yeah, so with that, what are you looking forward to with your second year? Because you've made it through that first year, and I even reflecting on my experience, like even just for any college student, I think that first year is a really pivotal year. It's a really hard year in a lot of ways. You're away from home for the first time, you're figuring things out, and then also like Ryan, you said for you, like having to kind of figure out where you even fit in this program, with the walk on situation. But now that you're past some of that and you've kind of got your routine, the expectations, your coaches, somewhat of like the academic rigor. What are you looking forward to for your second year and kind of moving forward?
Yeah, I'm looking forward just to build. I think that's kind of the word that comes to mind. It's like with football, it's like you've got over the initial like nerves of like meeting people. How am I going to fit into the team? How is practice going to look like? How are games going to look like? How is everything going to look like? Right? You know what to expect going forward, right? There's going to be some ins and outs that are different, but like for both T and I, we know basically what to expect from the year's progression for our sport, and so I think that's a big thing because when you're coming in, you really like, you might hear things, you might talk to teammates, but you haven't ever experienced it before. And so each of those like kind of events goes on in the year, it's all new. And new can be pretty intimidating and challenging when you're first encountering it. And so for me, it's like just working to build and not having so much of that stress come from just like experiencing just new things that you aren't used to, right? And kind of like always wondering in the back of my mind, like, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to fit in with this? How are people going to view me doing this? And so I think that's the biggest key with the sports side is there's still going to be the challenges of like trying to earn a spot, trying to earn as much time as you can, and perform as best as you can. But just knowing what to expect and kind of knowing people, knowing your coaching staff, knowing your teammates, that part is all a lot more figured out than it was a year ago. And so that really contributes. And as far as school goes, like I was talking about, I was like through that first year with homework, with tests, with like studying, because like studying and the homework load is something that at least for us, I go into a small public school, like you just don't really have any concept of what it's going to be like in college. It's like you might have like an hour of homework a night, right? Where going this, like we have like sometimes last year I had upwards of like 20 hours a week, where it's like you really have to block out time to say, hey, I'm going to study for 3 hours, or I'm going to, work with a classmate on this homework for 3 hours tonight. No one's forcing you to do it, right? It's not, you don't have your professors you don't even know, it's like no one's kind of holding your hand, walking you through these things. And not that I was necessarily expecting that, but you still have to get used to like living life like that and kind of juggling that with the big time commitment that you have with sports. And so for me, it's like I'm excited to, for one, start taking classes that are more geared towards my interests. Kind of getting some of the gen ed requirements out. In the first year is nice because then you are naturally more interested, which makes you want to go to class more, want to do your homework more. And then just having a better network of classmates and friends to really have that option to do homework together. I think that was really huge for me to figure out was like, don't try to be a superhero and just think that I can figure this out on my own like I did in high school, right? Just because like it's totally different. really kind of form those networks of classmates and of study groups, and then just using the resources that they have. Because, I mean, colleges have various levels of support with academics, but all colleges have that support. And so it's like you just kind of have to figure out what works for you, what you really want to pursue, and then just kind of go make it from there, because it's up to you to make sure that you're getting that help. Like I said, no one's going to come and like, walk you through the process of figuring out the best study habits and the best ways to approach tests, to approach homework. So you got to kind of figure it out. But I think that's a good thing. What the first year does is it kind of forces your hand to kind of figure out what works for you and what your best strategies are going to be going forward.
Yeah, I was also going to say, like, knowing what to expect now, because, like, I already went through first year of college, so all the things that I wish I could have done differently, I can do now. And so with that, like, making the most of my time and just, like, planning my days out ahead of time and, like, my schedule, instead of just, like, being lazy about it and, like, procrastinating about stuff. And so now, also just, like what he was saying, like, finding people to do your homework with and stuff like that, like, that'll be huge to do, like, find people in my class, because I didn't really talk to people in my class. I just kind of did my own thing, but I don't think there's any reason why I can't do that. And then, making the most of my time, I think will be a huge thing for me.
Yeah,
And then I was thinking too about like just because, you had also online classes, which were hard because it doesn't automatically give you the chance to meet other people and kind of have those study groups that are naturally made with in person.
And that also, like, had to do with my schedule, like with basketball and stuff. That's why I had online classes. But yeah, I recommend not taking online classes at all, if possible.
Yeah,
I feel like
it wasn't necessarily possible for you. But.
Yeah, it makes it harder to, like, force yourself to do stuff, especially if it's like I forgot what an asynchronous class, I think it is, where, like, all your assignments are due at, like, one part of the time of the week, and so, like, you have that whole week to try to get it all done, and then you save it to, like, last minute or something. It's not good. And you're not really, like, taking it all in. So yeah, figuring out how to do that too is good.
Yeah, well, I think just the perspective is good because, all of these things, even UT saying, like, well, I didn't take advantage of my time in some situations. Like, that's all part of that first year of figuring it out, right? Because you have no idea what it's going to be like, especially as an athlete. Like, there are different levels of commitment at different colleges, different expectations from coaches, and then you've got to fit that in with all of your academic stuff. So it's cool to hear, like, obviously now you can look back and kind of reflect and move forward, but I think it's just cool that first year you just get to kind of figure things out, and, like, you're going to be able to look back and realize, like, oh, I could have done things better in certain situations, but there's really no way of knowing before you put yourself through it and kind of figure it out as you go, which is why I think it's cool, as you're both going into your second year, to kind of have that perspective going forward and just seeing where things need to change, or how you can be more, productive or maybe more present in certain situations. I think that's just really, really cool to reflect on. So I want to ask, with all of the things that you have, I know both of you are involved in other things other than just sports and school. How do you balance all of those things, whether it be other activities you're involved with? I know you guys have got church stuff going on, friendships, relationships. We'll talk more about, like, the two of you and long distance, but how do you balance that stuff? How do you make certain things a priority and kind of figure that out?
Yeah, I think at least for me, like, being a college athlete, you kind of have to just kind of set your priorities. Like, and I know, like, it's always kind of like preach, like, school first, then sports, but, like, it really is, like, together, like, really blocking out your time for school, right? Like, if you have tests or class or whatever, like, and most of the times, most programs will work around to that some extent, to where you can kind of double prioritize school and sports as your number one. That being said, that takes up maybe like 75 to 80% of your, like, waking time most days, like, sometimes more. So it's like in some senses it makes it easy to prioritize because like you have no other options a lot. Like you kind of make the most of your school and sports schedule, and like whenever you have to do every day, that's what you do. It's like, and that's already kind of set in stone. The hard part is, right, is like the homework and the studying. Like you have to really, at least I experience, like you really have to set up blocks of time each and every day to kind of chip away at those things. Like T said, like when you have things that are due, like once a week or once every 2 weeks, like, and that's kind of how a lot of my classes are set up too. And sometimes you have like longer projects or essays, right? Like you don't have a teacher that's like checking up on you saying like, okay, how's the progress going? It's like, it's just, you better have it done and good by the time it's ready to turn in. And that doesn't happen by having like one day in front. And like sometimes you hear, right, like some college students are like, or college students, I guess, are just known for like cramming to the last second. Being an athlete, you don't really have like the liberty of doing that, right? Because like if you have a deadline coming up, you might have a game, a practice. You're not gonna be able to stay up till 4 in the morning because you have to wake up at 5 in the morning for a lift, right? So it's like you don't have the liberty to like kind of slack early on and then kind of catch up. Like sometimes you just physically don't have the time to do that, even if that's like your last resort, right? And so it takes a lot of planning. Um, and I think as far as like balancing other things, you just have to kind of decide what's important for that time that you don't have kind of caught up with school and sports. So like both of us got involved in a Christian organization. For me at least, like with kind of how intense football is, like it doesn't quite allow me to be as involved as I probably would like to if I wasn't doing a sport. But it just makes sure that I really value that time that is spent participating in that club. At our school, we call it HUFA, Harvard University Faith in Action. And so it's like we would have weekly Bible studies I was able to attend. We'd have some worship nights that every once in a while I was able to go to. And so it's like they have a lot of things. And so I was able to kind of just pour into it as much as I was able to. Right. And then kind of beyond that, I noticed that like we'll talk about T's and mine relationship after, but even with friendships, right, it's kind of like you don't necessarily want to look at it like this, but it is kind of like the leftover scraps of your time. It's like it's not worthless by any means. It doesn't mean anything less, but it's like whatever you don't have blocked up by those two big things in school and sports, that's when you try to just kind of devote that time in ways that kind of provide you joy and are meaningful to you.
Yeah, for me, I was gonna say, like, building, or like planning your days, or just having like a routine. Because I think that helps me a lot. Is if I have a routine that I stick to it, and I feel like I didn't create one last year, and so if I have one this year, it will be better, and like it'll actually like force me to do things and stay busy. Because I feel like a lot of times in the day, like I'd have practice and stuff like that, and then I just get tired, and so I just would, just kind of do my own thing and just do my homework later. But then I want to get my homework done, and so it's just I have to like plan and like stick to it. And then yeah, next year it'll be pretty. I feel tight for me, so like I'll have to put a schedule in. Like there's no way I can just do it how I did it last year. Um, but yeah, I think also just someone to hold me accountable to would be probably best for me to make sure that I'm getting it all done. But yeah.
Yeah, so I want to kind of move into talking more about you two specifically, because obviously you are doing a long distance relationship, but also you started your relationship kind of long distance. Like Ryan, you were going to Fall River, you're a couple hours away. So I guess how is it different now? And how do you kind of manage that being long distance? Obviously, like you said, Ryan, like you've got those two big things that are taking up a lot of your time. So how are you managing, making time for each other?
Yeah, like it's like not as in like a value, like I'm not saying this as in an area of value, but it is really like the time scraps. It's like so, and it doesn't mean it's any less important. But that's kind of what we've had to adjust to. And like obviously there's an entire other dynamic of now going to school on opposite ends of the country, right? Like we don't get to see each other in person except for a couple times over winter break and then over the summer. So part of that has been valuing that time. That's why like we made the decision over the summer that I was going to try to spend as much time in Chico And really, we've made it through since T's been home, and our summers happen to be like a month off because of our different school schedules. But we've been able to be around each other all summer, and we haven't ever had that. But that's kind of just like make up for the fact that like we don't see each other at all during the school year, right? So that's one challenge. And then, like I said, beyond that, like we don't just have like odes of time, and not that like any college student necessarily does, but right, you tend to have more time if you're not in the sport, and we don't have that time, and so it really has just been about valuing the time that we do have, and just ensuring, like T said, about making a routine. Like we would try to talk every night. It wouldn't always work, like there's things that come up. There's a 3-hour time difference that makes it tough if I have an early morning workout and T has like normal afternoon activities, right? Like it's late at night when it's kind of like afternoon in her time, right? And so that makes it kind of difficult. But we made it through. It's a lot about built on trust and faith, and knowing that like not every day, not every week is going to feel like we're at the top of our relationship, like we're the happiest we've ever been, and we're always on the same page. Like understand that that's not always going to happen, and there is going to be some conflict. There is going to be some misunderstanding that comes from at different times of the year. One of us thinking like, oh, I wish we would have had more time. I wish they would have committed more time here. So it's a lot about just like give and take and understanding each other's circumstances. I think it definitely helps that we're both college athletes. I think it would be very different. Like we would, in some sense, be unequally yoked if I think if one of us was and one of us wasn't, because we wouldn't really understand the time commitment. And so that does make it nice is when one of you is kind of burnt out all day from having school and having your sport, you're going to have less of a tendency to kind of like get frustrated with the other person if they might be a little shorter or might have some frustration to, that they want to kind of get out. We don't have that like misunderstanding of kind of why are you feeling this way, because we kind of both go through those periods of feeling that kind of exhaustion or frustration.
Yeah, definitely. I said definitely. What I looked forward to like every day was like when they need to call, they need to FaceTime. Because I was huge part of my day. Like that's when I was like the happiest is when I got to call him and stuff and just talk about my days and stuff, which was nice. And just like being someone I can vent to. It definitely wasn't easy, but I mean like we went through it already, kind of. So it's like we kind of knew what to expect. The only thing that was hard was just the time. I mean, the difference, I guess, that we had in high school and college was the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know you talked about it a little bit, but what does that intentional time look like? Like, obviously, you've spent most of the summer together and you're trying to, FaceTime each other as much as you can. Like, how do you make sure that that is intentional? I mean, obviously, like, it's hard because you want to, give all the details of your day and, like, you want to talk about, important stuff. And there's just a lot to kind of unpack and you don't have a lot of time. So how are you intentional with that and making sure you're making the most of it?
Yeah, I think, what it looked like, at least from my end, was like we really had to grow in maturity a lot. I think we kind of had to in high school as well. But you kind of think of like younger couples, high school or college, right? Like a lot of times when you're either hanging out daily or talking daily, most of the time it can be kind of like carefree and fun and just kind of like, like sometimes flirtatious and just getting to know each other, or like, however that kind of looks like. It's not always super heavy and deep, right? Like you think of like kind of a young relationship. And part of the learning experience for me is like sometimes I would want to just be like, wow, I just like I don't want to be too deep right now. Like we just want to have just funny time. Like I want to tell you something funny or whatever, like, and part of it was learning that like when we only have say like maybe an hour to talk when it's late at night for me and she's in between maybe practice and her like youth group, meeting or something. I know challenge, it's called challenge, but like when that happened, right? Like I think it's really important for us to kind of learn how to be mature and understand like, okay, it's time to kind of sacrifice maybe a little bit of that like more youthful type relationship where we can kind of just be more carefree and just kind of have a good time with the talk and realize like, no, if we only have an hour, like maybe like both of us might be going through something pretty serious, or we might be having some deep emotions that need to be talked about. And, like it's easier sometimes if it's just one of us, right? Because then it might be like, okay, I had a pretty good day. I don't really have a lot to unpack. So maybe it's your turn, right? So like maybe this is a day that you can kind of give more. But sometimes it's both of us. And so it's like, it's really understanding that we didn't necessarily have the, I guess, like the freedom just to kind of be like lackadaisical at that time and just kind of be like, and sometimes I think we were able to do that more in high school when we had longer periods of time where we could talk, where it's just kind of like, let's get to know each other. Let's just talk about random things that happen. Where in college, I think we had a pretty big adjustment to focusing on what's really important, focusing on at times like our faith, how that journey was going individually and together, deeper kind of elements of our relationship that need to be talked about over time. Like I said, it might not be what you always want to talk about, or it might not be the most fun conversations all the time. But those were what was really important, at least from my end, kind of making that time intentional when we didn't have that much.
Yeah, that's he basically said it like how I would say it, I guess, or he said it perfectly. But
Yeah, and I
that,
know UT also talked about like the talking about your frustrations. So how does that fit in too? Because like I know you're both in a sport, and there's a lot of variables that come into that. Like maybe you have frustration with other teammates, with playing time, coaches, like anything really. How does that play into, both of you are going through a similar, experience? How do you kind of support one another in that?
yeah. Well, I mean, Ryan did a really good job when it comes to him and stuff, and he would just always like help me out and like talk me like through it, and basically like always like give it to God at the end. But yeah, I feel like I would get pretty frustrated over things, and so he would just be able to calm me down, which is I definitely needed it because sometimes it would just like take over my brain. But yeah, he did a good job of just letting me know that everything's gonna be okay, and I mean it's just a challenge, but like I can get through it, so it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, and T won't really brag on herself if you haven't noticed, but I think a big kind of difference with taking out frustrations is Talysha was having a very significant role with her team as a freshman. And so a lot of like the emotions and stress and frustrations came from like Talysha was immediately asked to contribute on a team that was like really vying for their conference championship the whole year and had success in past seasons, right? So like she kind of jumps into her season and like she's right in the swing of things, and whether it be frustration, stress, sometimes like just kind of sadness about games that might have lost or didn't have her best performance, right? Like so she was constantly dealing with a lot of that right when she jumped into the season. And so that was important for me to understand, right? Because I didn't play at all. So I still had plenty of frustrations to get out to her, and that was important for both of us. But like she was kind of had a different level of like importance to her role on the team, And so I think both of us understanding where each other were at, right? Like where I was in a situation where I just wanted to kind of like make some ground and kind of put together good strings of practices and get noticed, and where she was like being relied on hugely by her team to contribute each and every game that they had. So it's like we kind of had to, I think, put ourselves in each other's shoes and kind of know why and where those frustrations were coming from, and ultimately, like frustration is just stems out of stress, right? So it's like whatever those stresses are and whatever is kind of like causing that friction in our own mind and in our hearts of what's kind of bothering us at the time, like kind of just talking out and knowing about what that is, I think really helped, and knowing that our situations weren't the same, right? Like my frustrations that I could relate to, like, man, I just want to be noticed, like were different from hers, whereas like, hey, like this is stressing me out, this is frustrating when this happens in a game, or this is like, I'm being relied on by the team for this, and people are kind of engaging me with me in this way, right? Like they're very different in a sense, but that's why it was important for us to be able to understand where each of us were coming from.
Yeah. No, and one thing I want to mention too, I think this is really valuable. What you guys showed a great amount of maturity, I think, even before going off to college. Like obviously, Ryan, you had a great opportunity to go to Harvard, potentially play. Like now you're on the team, and then T, like you automatically had a spot playing at Santa Cruz, and I know that must have been a really tough decision to go on opposite ends of the country. But what I saw, from a close observer, is just how you supported one another in that. And I think that's really important because you both recognize that you had to do what was best for yourselves individually and then figure out how that worked together. And I think that's super important because a lot of people, if you're in a relationship in high school, one person wants to follow the other one, and I understand it, it makes sense, but especially with you guys being successful in your sport, having the opportunity to keep playing, I'm really proud of you guys for both doing your own thing, but then figuring out how you could still figure things out. I know it's tough, and it's definitely not like the ideal situation, but again, I just think the support is really really valuable, and you can see that even just in this conversation, like how you are supporting one another, and yet there's no ill feelings towards one another, like, oh well, you went across the country, or you didn't come with me. Like, the way that you support one another is just super cool, and I've seen that from the beginning, before you even got to college, and then now obviously it's cool to see how you've been able to navigate that. It's just I admire you in a lot of ways for it.
Well, thanks, Nat.
Thank you.
No, but I think, there's a lot to it, like with this. I guess part of it made it easy to not like chase each other because T kind of figured out what she was going to do first, right? And had a really great opportunity from Santa Cruz that kind of arose like early on, senior year, late junior year, right? Like you kind of knew ish around then. And UC Santa Cruz does not have a football team, right? And I had kind of made up my mind that I wanted to play football in college. So like from that very point, like we kind of figured like, okay, we honestly never really, like, we talked about how it would be nice, but we never really like had a realistic option of like, oh, we might go to the same school, And so that's kind of how it started. And so that made it easy to where we didn't get caught up in like the dream of like, oh, could we do it? Could we do it? And then from then, like I kind of knew, right? T kind of had her option figured out of being in California, obviously not close to home, but like a drive from home, So it's like she kind of knew where, like we kind of knew where she was going to be first. And then she did a really great job. Just like automatically, there was no like, jealousy is not the right word, but there was no like kind of, like you said, like ill feelings towards anything that I was going to do, right? Like she said from the beginning, like the first school I found out I got into was Harvard. And she said, hey, like if this is what you want to do it. We'll make it work.
How did I tell you not to go to Harvard?
Well, okay. Yeah. But, right. But she said like, no matter what was going to be the best option for me, that's what she wanted. Right. And so, whereas like, obviously you can say like, that's the right thing to do. Sure. But it's not easy, and like, we both would have rather probably like, if there was a just as good of an opportunity, like to be closer, of course. Right. Where we could like, every once in a while go see each other on a weekend or whatever, we knew that going to Harvard, that wasn't going to be possible. It was, and kind of with like, we talked about, and I don't want to get too much into like the money situation, but like, I'm not in a position to where it's like, I can just fly home for like Thanksgiving or Easter or, it's like fly there and back. Like that's going to be really expensive. And with paying for school, like that's just not going to be an option for me. And so that was nice to kind of have her support through it all, and there was never like any kind of friction that was caused by that decision alone, right? Like as a result of being so far apart, yeah, like there's going to be challenges, there's going to be like a different dynamic that comes from that, but from the decision, like we were both happy for each other and where we were going, and so that was, I think, very valuable. And then we kind of thought like, like, hey, if this relationship is going to work, like let's put it to the biggest test it can possibly have, right? Like let's just go live 4 years apart from each other. So it's like, if we make it through that, then we can make it through anything, And so like that kind of sounds a little corny, but like I think there's true value in that, where we're like, if we go off to college and decide like, oh, we're like, this isn't going to work, or we don't really miss each other or whatever, like, then okay, like then that's what God's plan is, and that's how it's going to be. Luckily, like we haven't experienced that, and we found that like, well, yes, it's very challenging, as we do want, like obviously you're going to miss each other and want to be around each other, but we didn't have any like kind of wavering like idea about how our relationship was doing and where we wanted to go with it,
Yeah, I know that for both of you, I mean, Ryan, you mentioned like trusting God's plan for both of you. I know your faith is super important to both of you. So I want to give you a chance just to share like a little bit of your testimony, like how you kind of found the Lord and what that's looked like. And then we'll kind of talk about how that works into your relationship as well.
Yeah, so I didn't really grow up going to church or anything. I mean, we went occasionally, but not a lot. And so I didn't really have God in my life, but I knew I always wanted him to be a part of my life. But I just didn't know how to like start or where I go. And luckily for me, I met Ryan, and so he was able to help me in that journey to just kind of let me know who Jesus is and just tell me more about it. And then I really grew though when I went off to college and kind of went on my own, and I found a great community called Challenge. They found me on the first day of welcome week, and yeah, I was just walking around like the school, and they just like in the woods because Santa Cruz is like pretty crazy, but I was just walking in the woods, and they came up to me with a survey, and then they gave me some of their events, and so I decided to go to the couple and check it out, and I found some really good people. There's a girl named Molly who disciples me, and so I've been able to really learn a lot from her. But then I kind of wasn't able to go to a lot of stuff because of basketball, so it kind of I didn't decline, but like I wasn't able to be in the community as much, and so yeah, I didn't really get to do much. And then after basketball, I really grew even more because I went to this spring break retreat, and I just really found myself and who God was there. And then I started going to church there, became a member of the church, and now I'm on the core team for Challenge, and so it's been awesome. And yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, mine like is a little different than T's, but like like you can kind of see like where our paths kind of met with our faith. Where I did grow up in like Christian home, as Natalie knows, like we did grow up going to church. By no means like the most like obedient, faithful family of all time. Like I know a lot of times like during junior high and high school is like AU took up most of our weekends. It's like weren't always super involved in the church, but always had a good, strong faith background in our family. So that kind of, I guess, made it easier for me to just kind of have like a road towards a relationship with God. And so I ended up like getting baptized when I was 8, committing my life to God then, but without like probably fully understanding what that really meant. It was really like after my freshman year of high school, when I went and coached at a Christian basketball camp that I'd been to as a camper, that I really got close with some of my coaches who had been really strong mentors in my life there. That I kind of really decided like, okay, I really want to take my relationship with God seriously and make this kind of the focal point of my life. And so since then, it's like been, by no means like just like a ladder or just a straight arrow up, but been consistently just growing closer and closer. And then having met Talysha, that has really helped me grow because, like you said, like where we did come from like slightly different backgrounds as far as like our experience in church and our knowledge, let's say, of Veggie Tales and children's church that like taught us all the basics of the Bible. Like we really shared a strong desire for wanting to just know God more and build our lives around what God may have for us. And so we've been building that together ever since. And then as we, like Talysha said, as we went off, it was really good. And it was really good for me to see Talysha's growth. It was like, and it almost really acted for like a kick in the pants for me. It was like to see everything that Talysha was doing and her great desire for time in the Bible, time in prayer, time in Christian community. Where I could have tendencies to just kind of let myself kind of float. Just like, okay, I'm checking the boxes, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do for the most part. It's like I'm living my life, in a Christian manner for the most part. Not always, but like trying to do that, and then seeing Talysha's real desire was able to kind of push me to really have that and build that desire too. We're still obviously building. Yeah, right now, we're by no means we're close to the end of our journey with God. But like we've been able to kind of feed off each other as we go, and have gone in our relationship to where where we want to commit our life, or like we want to devote our lives to Christ and in spreading His name and building our lives in obedience towards Him. So
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit because I know you've talked about how you've kind of encouraged one another. So, especially being far away, like obviously you've got time to spend on your own, but how do you kind of prioritize your individual relationships with Christ and then also walking alongside each other and encouraging each other? How does that work for you?
yeah, I think it really is like almost just like twofold, like two different, um, not like totally separate, but kind of separate, like um, paths with that. So it's like individually, especially being apart. Like over the summer, a lot of our kind of faith journey was together, but individually, it's really important that each of us is in our own community in college, has our own friends and disciplers that we can go to, has our own kind of separate church community, different Bible studies. So like we really are kind of growing our faith in two separate areas, but also two different paths. Like in those respective areas. And then together, what a lot of times it looked like in college was kind of taking those individual paths that we had. So like our experience with Bible studies, our experience with fellowship with our friends around us is like taking that and then using our time talking to kind of bring that together and bring that into the focus in our own relationship too. It's like I think one thing we want to get better at this year is having more time to spend in the Bible together. But part of why we always didn't have that is because we tried to fit in our intentional time, really just conversing and talking about what we were learning about, what we were growing in those moments separately, and I think that was something that was really important for us that, at least for me, I didn't really recognize that was going to be important in high school. Like I was kind of thinking like, oh, I always kind of want to be, let's do this together. Let's always read the Bible together. Let's always pray together. Let's always do this together. And we really didn't branch out too far in our faith apart from each other in high school. And so like for me, I was thinking like, oh, that's okay. Like we're close. Like we want that. But it was really important to know like just how important that is once we got into college. It's like we don't need to be like holding hands the entire time. Is that going to be important as we progress in our relationship? Yes, 100%. But it's also important to see that individual growth. And like T said, each of us were really able to grow more by being apart than we probably would have even if we were, let's say, going to college together and going to all these events and discipleship opportunities together. We were able to take those different experiences and grow more, I think, because we were apart.
Yeah, it was very important for me to like branch out and go my own way in college and just like to figure out a bunch of stuff for myself and just kind of learn as I go. And so like I knew like the first thing I wanted was to find a Christian club, and so I knew God put them on that path when I was just walking and for them to come up to me. And so yeah, just really understanding and just learning new things is just great apart. But then like when we would like FaceTime and stuff like that, we would like I would tell him what I'm learning, or like I'd ask him any questions that I have, and he would just help me grow too. And so I think all of it together has been awesome. But for sure, like going on my own to figure out more about God is definitely very important for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think we could talk about this stuff for hours because I mean, you guys are very wise and obviously have figured out a lot in your walk um, with the Lord and then also together. But just to wrap things up, I want to give you guys a chance if you have anything else you want to add, maybe any advice, either for just someone playing college athletics or someone who's in a long distance relationship or both. What if you have any advice that you want or anything else that we didn't really touch on that you want to add before we wrap things up with our last question?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Something that I would say or like give advice is just good communication. For us, like being so far apart was really hard, and so just like figuring out our like schedules together. Like we had a schedule together, so we would know what we were doing um, in the day and stuff, and just being able to know when we could call each other or just even text each other was really great. Um, yeah, communication was definitely a huge thing that made our relationship work.
Mhm. Yeah, I think just as far as like how the relationship has worked, and like how, like you said, like we've been through challenges, had conflicts. It's like it's by no means we don't want to like portray like this was like the perfect relationship and we did everything the right way. But I think what at least for me, and I think probably what we both really learned and are continuing to learn is like kind of trying to build a biblical relationship that is based on sacrifice. Like going and doing long distance is like will force your hand to grow in that area in some sense, right? Like you can still push to grow in that as much as you can, right? And you should, but like we really had to learn how to be selfless, how to put each other first, because like as we should be doing that all the time, but we each went through times where like we really needed that from the other person, right? So it's like we're there might be days that are tougher than others. We might be have certain seasons of the year that are tougher than others, and so it's like having someone you can go back to and know that they really care about your interests. They really care about how you are doing, even above themselves, right? And if you have that reciprocated both ways, then it leads to each other caring for one another, like more than you're even like caring about yourself. And so that's why it became something that we were able to draw on, right? Because like if you're not really getting something out of it, you're not going to want to like make that extra half hour, that 45 minutes of time when you might just be dead. You might want to just relax. But like that's why it was so beneficial for us is like we really wanted that time because it poured into both of us, right? So it's like we were able to have that relationship where we really felt like we needed that time and we needed that outpouring of each other's love and support because like we didn't it wasn't as good as our own like self support of each other, right? So it's like we needed that point in from both of us. And so I think that was important to know. And just I think to give us a good example going forward of like how do we build this sacrificial love that God wants us to have for each other is like, well, one part is like by forcing your hand and saying like, well, you need to or else it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay, well, I'm going to give you guys each the last question, the one that I ask everyone that comes on the podcast. What does it look like for you to live authentically?
For me, I guess it's like staying true to myself and sticking to my beliefs, and just like making sure that someone is holding me accountable. But really, just going off my beliefs and everything, um, focusing on God, which is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, like very similar, like with the whole idea of authentic performance as, the owner slash CEO or whatever you are of authentic performance, like I mean, the whole idea, right, is through all the challenges, through all the sometimes noise, sometimes just like busyness, right, that life brings, that the major focus is integrity, and as believers, that integrity is centered around Jesus and our belief in him and our relationship with God, right? So it's like making sure that our performance, our attitude, our thoughts, that we're constantly trying to make those as authentic to God as we can. And so it's like, where it doesn't always have to be faith based, right? Like you can have authenticity without faith. But I guess as believers, like we know that that's why you're doing what you're doing is that through all these challenges, right, as life throws all these things at us, that we can try to build these strategies in order to maintain that integrity to God and to what we believe in. Like Talysha was saying, that it doesn't we don't have to be shaped by our circumstances, right? But we can shape our circumstances because of who we are. And that who we are and what we believe in our firm foundation is not shaken by all these things that are going on. Why are you smiling? That was good, huh? but but that like we have that foundation built, and then in that part that affects what goes on around us. So it's like it's not something that is blowing in the wind, right? Like we are strong. We know what we are. We know who we are, and who we are created by, right? And so that gives us the strength to go through life as we want to, and as we're instructed to do so. So I don't know. That's what I think of with authentic performance. But you probably know what you thought when you were creating it. But
Well, I appreciate both of you being here and just sharing your wisdom, and just your experience. I think it's really valuable to hear from people who are going through it, and you guys are still, in the thick of it. Obviously, like been through your first year, but you're still, you know, grinding every day. So thank you for being here. I know this is going to be a blessing to many.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We would love to hear what you found valuable in this episode. So please DM us on Instagram at Authentic Performance or leave a review. They're super, super helpful for us. We're so thankful that you're on this journey with us and want to invite you to be a part of the Authentic Performance fam. You can check out more of how we're supporting athletes at theauthenticperformance.com. Also, let us know what you want to hear on the podcast next or who you want to hear. We appreciate your feedback and want to give you the best possible resources and support. In the meantime, think about how you can live authentically. See you next time.